I wanted to talk about the Death Star of the theory of non-belief in God. You can call it atheism, evolutionism, Big Bangism. Bottom line is disbelief in God and how it ends right when it begins. Because when you actually have your eyes open to science, and I do mean observational science, things that you can measure out, that you can apply, that you can recalibrate, that you can repeat. I'm talking about mathematical probabilities and strict logic, without bias, without subjective opinions and prejudice. Strict observational science. It's so clear to see that nature is unnatural. Not improbable, but impossible to have been created naturally without a creator that is supernatural. It just does not add up. So let's talk about the very early stages, because too many times people get caught up in evolution, and that is such a disservice. Because evolution really is the cherry on top. You know, you have a cake, you have frosting, you put up some whipped cream, and then you put a cherry on top. That's evolution. But why are we even talking about the theory of evolution? My argument is not only you don't have a cherry, you don't even have a cake. You don't even have a table for the cake to sit on, nor do you even have a floor for the table. You got nothing. From the very beginning, the universe itself, creation, something out of nothing, impossible. But that's not my argument here. Today I want to focus strictly on stars, because too many times I think this is overlooked. Stars are impossible to have formed naturally. And, as science may have it, we have never observed a star being formed. If you're honest, you will admit that. Sure, we have seen plenty of stars explode in this event called nova, supernova, yet we have not seen even one star being formed. Interesting. Especially interesting considering the fact that there are approximately, you ready for this? 100 billion trillion stars in the observable universe. That's right. Approximately. We don't know, but 100 billion trillion stars. That is a number that is inconceivable, really. They say there gotta be at least 1 trillion galaxies, and our galaxy, the Milky Way, has about 100 billion stars, we think. We don't know, but if that's an average galaxy, then surely there gotta be at least 100 billion trillion stars in the observable universe. And obviously not the entire universe is observable. We can see to a distance of what we use the term light years, which is not a measure of time, but of distance. So we can see about 13.8 billion light years each direction. So all in all, from that end to the other, about 26, 27 billion light years. That's by itself is just unreal and crazy distances that we can see how vast the universe is. Imagine this, 100 billion trillion stars in this vast space. We have no idea what it even is. But here's the problem for the unbeliever. You ready for this? If the universe existed for 13.8 billion years, according to the atheist evolutionist, that's what they say, the age of the universe, let's round it up to 14, just to make it easier for conversation. 14 billion years. You got 100 billion trillion stars. 14 billion years. Now we know that stars did not show up immediately as soon as the universe was created, because the Big Bang allegedly was so hot, no matter could have existed. It had to be strictly energy. And once the energy cooled down enough to be able to transform into matter, that would be the three lightest elements, helium, hydrogen, and lithium, had to be millions of years, allegedly. Of course, this is all theory, it's not science. But nevertheless, stars had to be forming at some point. And considering the fact that there are 100 billion trillion stars, my question is, well, if you average out the amount of stars over 14 billion years, that would mean that you have about, again, rough math here, don't catch me on the dot, but many stars forming every single second. Do the math. 100 billion trillion divided by 14 billion. That would equivalent how many stars formed in a year. Now, considering there are 365 days in a year, divide that number by 365, and then divide that number by 24 hours to get how many stars an hour, and then by 60 for a minute and 60 for a second. Simply put, there ought to be multiple stars, great multiple stars, formed every single second. And yet we have not seen even one. Not even one. In the hundreds of years we've been observing and documenting the stars, if not thousands, astronomy has been around for a while. The invention of the telescope was like 500 years ago, give or take. We haven't seen even one. Oh, sure, they say it takes millions of years for stars to form, but, well, okay, so they have started forming millions of years ago, but surely some of them ought to finish forming every single second. I mean, that's just common sense, right? If you have so many stars, well, why did they stop forming? If the universe is ever expanding and we do see stars blow up, where are the new stars that are being formed? But here's the real problem. The real problem is, how do stars form? That's a doozy. Because everyone would tell you this, that stars on their own cannot form. The math just doesn't work. Because stars are formed, allegedly, by what you call atomic fusion. Unlike atomic fusion is when hydrogen breaks down into helium and releases this enormous amount of energy, and you got this big ball of gas that is constantly breaking down the molecular structure of hydrogen, emitting all of that heat and light and cosmic radiation. That is what our sun does. It is a blazing ball of atomic fusion. Millions of degrees in its core, Celsius. Just heat that is unimaginable, crazy. How does that even happen? Well, remember what we said earlier about the creation of the universe. There was no matter, there was no helium or hydrogen, there was just energy who allegedly cooled down to become matter, and that's a whole can of worms in itself, but let's just go with it for now. If you ask scientists how was our sun formed, they would tell you simply, there was a cloud of gas, what they call nebula, a cloud of hydrogen and helium just floating out in a typical region of space. When a nearby star exploded, listen to this is what they say, not mine. This is the atheists' debate. A nearby star exploded, charging this cloud of gas with so much energy. It pressed it and compressed it, that the gases started compressing, and by compressing, they started heating up more and more and more until they hit that critical point where certain portions of this cloud started collapsing into itself, increasing the gravitational pull, until, of course, it got to the temperature where nuclear fusion happened. Hydrogen started splitting open and converting into helium, and, well, the rest is history. The star was formed. But so many problems with this theory. First and foremost, a nearby star, which star? You know, the nearest star to our sun, Alpha Centauri, is some 4 light years away from the sun. You know how far that is? 4 light years away. Might not sound like a lot, but when you realize light year, just 1 light year is like 9 trillion kilometers away. Something like that. We're talking about 4 of those. That is such a huge distance that it doesn't even matter what happens 40 trillion kilometers away. It's going to have small to no significant impact whatsoever on anything that happens here. Maybe a slight solar wind or a breeze, but to cause a nuclear fusion, remember, in a typical region of space, there is not much gravitational pull, because gravitational pull is a function of mass, and in space there is nothing. Now sure, gas has some mass to it and slight gravitational pull, but yet the resistance to compression of any form of gas is so much greater than its own gravitational pull. And that is why I said scientists all agree on this, that the only way a star could form is with some sort of an external pressure to compress it, because on its own, it's impossible. Gas does not just compress itself. Have you ever tried pumping a balloon or an air tank or anything like that, scuba diving? You have to physically use a pump. And as soon as you stop pumping, if you do not put a lid on it, it will lose the pressure pretty much instantly, because gas does not like being compressed. It resists it. And the more you compress it, the harder it is to compress. And you're going to have to apply more force, because it wants to revert to its original state. Cool, relaxed, and expanded. So you're going to have some sort of a massive force pressing it and compressing it in order to achieve those levels of nuclear fusion. Now, like I said, well, if a star blew up, even 4 light years away, that you're going to have at least like 3 stars on all sorts of directions, because think about it, if you have a balloon and you're just blowing on it from one side, it's not going to compress, it's simply going to move the other way. So you're going to have to have something on the other side also blowing. But then if I'm blowing from the right, you're blowing from the left, well, it's going to go to the other direction. It's going to go, right? I mean, you got north, south, east, and west. I'm blowing for the north, you're from the south, it's going to go east. So you got to have something in the east, you got to have something in the west, and then don't forget up and down. It's a 3-dimensional space, so you really got to have stars blowing up from all over the place in order to fully compress it. But then again, that wouldn't work either. Because we have seen supernovas. They don't last very long compared to how long it allegedly takes for a star to form. If it takes millions of years for a star to form, well, how long does the pressure last? blow up a balloon just to blow for a while. Yes, it's going to grow, but eventually you're going to run out of air. And what's going to happen to all of that pressure? Decompress. It's not going to keep going when the pressure has stopped. Supernovas are fast, they're poof, and they're gone, relatively speaking. So, okay, you've pressed on it, and it maybe have compressed by 10, 20, 30, 40%, but then it's over. So as quickly as it compressed, it's going to decompress. There's no way it is going to sustain that compression over millions of years to reach that critical point. And here's another point. If you do need at least 2 to 3 massive stars blowing up in the proximity of a cloud of gas in order for that fusion to occur, well, hello, what about the first stars? How did they appear? There was nothing. If you have to have stars in order to create stars, then how did the first stars ever get created? And you can't use the Big Bang again. The Big Bang, there was no matter. It was so hot, there was simply energy. All of that had to cool down and expand, spread out. So there was no force that could ever compress this cloud of alleged gas. So, let me wrap it up for you in case you're not following me. There is absolutely no scientific way for stars to form. Not the first star, nor the second, or any of the hundreds of billions of trillions of stars we see today. And if it did take 2 to 3 stars to form one star, the stars would have been decreasing, not increasing. And out of all of those supernovas we've witnessed, we have not seen even one nebula or anything that is being charged with that atomic power in order to start collapsing on its own. Sure, we see nebulas, but they're just clouds of gas. They're not doing anything. They're just there because the Creator put them there. You could look at it and say that's a star forming, but you have no evidence. It's not doing anything. It's just sitting there. It's not doing anything. Just because it looks like something doesn't mean it is. It's not forming into anything. It's just a cloud of gas. And there is no pressure being applied to it in order to make it become into something else. But then again, that's not your issue, is it? Because your disbelief in God is not based on science, but on rebellion. And again, I'm just talking about stars here, right? Evolution. We haven't even got to evolution. You can't have evolution before you have stars. If you can't even have stars, how are you going to get a planet? Without the sun, without stars, there is nothing. Planets do not produce energy. They would just not be. And not to mention all of these heavier elements, like oxygen. Allegedly, from the theory of the Big Bang, they all came from the blowing up, the death of the first generation stars, the stars that were only formed with hydrogen, helium, and lithium, because those are the only elements that could have been created following the Big Bang. So you gotta have those stars, and then those stars have to blow up and produce these other elements as they explode. That theory is so nonsense, makes no sense at all, and it's unscientific and it defies what we see. It defies logic, math, and observational science. It's impossible to have anything without God. Just repent. Stop trying to go to the moon and back in order to prove why you can be wicked and get away with it. You cannot. Just humble yourself, submit unto your Maker, do what is just and right. Forsake your Death Star and believe in the living God of the stars.